key points I kind of wrote down to talk with you is that, on one hand, since the 70s, we've had the Silicon Revolution, chips and computer and software and all of that that's happened in the last 50 years. But then this has not been this frontier has been neglected, so to speak, right? Like this kind of innovation in building your urban environments. How do you design, like this could be a very viable career path if we made that the frontier and said, okay, look, we need people who can think outside the box and specifically tailor it to that environment, that culture, that background, that heritage that they inherited, and that legacy of whatever is in that part of the city or town, and all the innovations kind of come along for that, and normalizing that as a career path for certain people and make it, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is that from what I can tell, because I'm very passionate about this particular subject, is that we never saw it as the next innovation realm, so to speak, right? Would you agree with that? Or
no, I think you're absolutely right, and maybe that's one of the problems that is also trying to discuss somewhat in the book, which is the question of value. What is considered as valuable, and what is value creation? And I guess it's very obvious to say, okay, you made a lot of chips, they can work in an operating system in a computer, and you can make money of it. So everybody understand that this is somehow a value because you can count it, right? In terms of megawatts or RAM or money, simply. So it's easy to count and calculate and understand. And therefore, there's also investors, people who want to do it, And here, when we talk about neighborhoods, there's not really a protagonist, right? So even the public sector, you could say, if you have a public sector that's strong and has resources, even for them, the neighborhood perspective is not so obvious, because neighbors, the local community can also be annoying and demanding and not agreeing with the public plans. So the neighborhood is, in a sense, it's everybody and nobody to a certain extent, right? Of course, there can be maybe some local associations, some communities around the school or the church, but it's not a formalized, let's say, administrative entity, at least not all the time. So who's actually, in whose interest is it to make a better everyday life? Yeah, maybe it's some politicians, and again, some ambitious civil servants, and maybe also some urban developers that, even though they have to make money, they also want to make a good job. And so there are people, of course, in all kinds of sectors that I think try to do these things when they work. But there's also a lot of people who don't give a fuck. They just want to build that shit and get it done with and sell it expensive and get rich. Or even in the public sector, they just want to get it done with without any hassle, without getting any problems, without making it too complicated. And the thing is, what you just mentioned about local heritage and the community, it's complicated. It's not just building the same building you built, 3 weeks ago on another site. Local is complicated. It's a little bit more. It requires, understanding what's actually going on here, So there are things here that to some extent go against innovation, against monetizing it, commercializing it. But of course, I think what we need to do is to try to show that it actually creates value. So I think for the public sector, we need to show that if we make good cities, we actually reduce health costs, and we make people more, robust and less mental ill. So we can kind of show that there's kind of actually societal value created through good urban design and good community building. And maybe also we need to articulate a language for how much it just matters, because it's beautiful, because it's good, it's joyful. So I think there are two levels of, let's say, the value discussion we need to have is, yes, this actually saves money or creates value on a societal level because people are happier and fitter and don't demand it so much, less conflict, maybe even less crime, etc. But then also just the more just existential, that this is how we form our lives. Let's make the best of it.
Yeah, and is there, like, as kind of like, I don't know if I read in the book, but is that one of the imperatives that came out of the book, that we have to have ways to properly quantify these benefits and present it in a language that is understandable to, like, this, let's say, the city officials or the people and things like that?
Yeah, that let's say if you call it second order value creation in the book, which is indeed that and some people are working on this already. Gale architects from Denmark and others are working on trying to quantify, let's say, these health benefits from urban design and urban planning. So I think that is an important part of it. But I also think the other part, let's say, the more existential and I don't know, life world experience of good neighborhoods, I think we also need to insist that there's a language beyond quantifiable. So I think we need to do both. Operate in the, let's say, the vocabulary of spreadsheets and quantifiable values, but also to try to rephrase in plain language. This matters. You look, use your eyes. You know, I don't think we cannot reduce everything just to the spreadsheet, let's say, language. So I think we need to do both.
Yeah. This is a little bit of a cultural question for you, Christian, is that a lot of what you're describing there is, I would say, in the book, there's this sense that things are democratized. There's more local participation, people partaking in the overall kind of, like, if it's a city planning, you know, you're encouraging more participation from the local citizens, for example, to come together and throw in your ideas. And on one hand, and then you're also kind of like downplaying the whole, like, capitalist, you know, tendencies to make money and all of these things. So I kind of wonder, if I have to map this onto, like, America, for example, which is a highly capitalistic country, everything comes down to how much money can we make. If I make this investment, where's the money going to come? Where's the, you know, that kind of, like, so is this more, is your intuitions more that this is suitable for the Scandinavian context because you have already that substrate, so to speak, the cultural substrate of, you know, kind of a socialistic kind of mindset, so it's much easier to implement, or do you think this, I don't know what you think about it, because I mean the lot of the things you talk about there is not entirely like extreme capitalism, like I think you touched upon it previously, but I don't know what you, I guess my question is that, are you looking at it purely from a European kind of a socialistic lens?
That's a good question. Maybe to some extent I am, or we are looking from, let's say, our place in the world, and it was also a discussion whether how could we include other perspectives. But I guess to some extent we are in this book looking at the potentials of having a fairly activist, let's say, public sector, and of course I believe that is a viable way for much more countries around the world or cities, but whether that's realistic, of course it's not realistic in very poor countries with very bad governance and corrupt politicians, etc. So we are talking in that type of context. Though I think it's one to say that especially in Norway, even that looks very social democratic. I would say the urban market is totally driven by capital, and maybe even to surprisingly extent. So it's really like it's just the good old capitalists that run the urban development. So here we also, let's say, trying to make an argument in our context that we need to remember, let's say, our social democratic roots, and it's also important to say that what we are suggesting is not that the state or the city authorities should do everything themselves, rather the opposite. This is the third way that we are saying that what the city or the public sector needs to do is to orchestrate a development environment, and let's say an ecology of stakeholders and knowledge holders in this realm, and they should work together to make great stuff. So I don't think that the city or the public sector they don't hold the answers themselves, but they need to open up and let's say curate or facilitate urban development processes much more actively than they normally do. And this is then inspired a little bit by the Italian-American economist Mariana Mazzucato, where we have drawn the mission from a mission neighborhood. She wrote the mission economy, a moonshot guide to reforming capitalists, I think is the subtitle, and that is indeed with the same idea that the state or the public sector needs to rewire the way it enables private capital and civil society to engage with the public sector. not just saying no or being, be more innovative, more open, more experimental. That's what we're trying to propose.